Thank you for joining us today. I feel really fortunate to be on the farm in the sanctuary and beauty of the farm together with all of you. My name is Derry Ganshorn and I'm the Executive Director of the Homeless Garden Project. But first I want to thank a few people, and we also have some big and very exciting news to share. Thanks to all the people who made this event possible. Please take a look at our program to appreciate our sponsors and all of the people that came together to make this happen. Thank you to tonight's chefs. I think they're still in the kitchen, but we'll just say their names. Chef Emily Beggs of Kin & Kitchen, to the appetizers. Anna Bartolini of La Bellina is doing the salad. And Leonardo Ramirez of the Charapa Project is doing the entree. Yolanda Santos is back again with an amazing dessert. Thank you so much to these chefs. And thank you so much to our generous volunteers. Please take a bow. And you're an HDP employee, please stand so we can recognize you. There's a couple people not on this one tonight. Some of our staff are really busy working. I feel lucky to have this passionate and very capable team. If you're a current HDP board member, would you please stand? And I'd like to acknowledge our board president, Ron Slack. If you could just give a wave, Ron. And then past HDP board members, could you please stand? Thank you for your leadership. We're so grateful to our board members. We have some elected officials here. We have John Laird. Yay, John. And now I'd like to ask Ron Swenson to stand. And you can remain standing. Ron, you can keep standing. Please keep standing. Ron owns this land and has allowed us to farm here free of charge since 1995. Has made our work possible.
A minor correction, actually $1 a year.
We have stewarded this land for almost 30 years. We've grown a community around this land. Hundreds of trainees have worked and healed and grown on this land. We love this land. And that is why we are very excited to announce that the Homeless Garden Project has signed an agreement to purchase 4 acres of this land. An agreement with Ron for this land, this very land that we're standing on right now. And we're so excited about this progress, and we still have some work to do. The agreement will be final when we have secured all the entitlements and permits needed to farm and build our new permanent site here. Many of you contributed to our Pogonip Capital campaign. We're so grateful for your trust and support. When we found out that the soil at Pogonip is contaminated and needs remediation, That was very difficult news for our organization. But you have stayed with us through that difficult time, and I am deeply grateful to you for your continued support. Thank you to our board of directors for forging this path forward. We are very excited about what a permanent site at Natural Bridges Farm can help us to accomplish, and we'll continue to update you on the progress with this site. Now I'd like to ask Senator John Laird to come up with an announcement.
It's a lot like the legislative process. I will be uncharacteristically brief. It's hard to follow that announcement, but we, on behalf of Gail and Dawn and I have a presentation in a moment, but we are trying to realign state homeless funding to match what's actually going on in places. It's sort of urban centric, and it doesn't take into account what goes on in non-urban areas. So the fact that you're all here, you're supporting an amazing program that makes a difference, strengthens us in being able to go back and say, these are the types of things that we need to support and reward with what the state is doing. So we really, on behalf of Assembly Members Gail Peller and Dawn Addis and myself, we have official recognition from the state legislature that recognizes exactly the work that's being done here and the difference it's made in people's lives, and given the announcement, the difference it's going to make going forward. So it's my pleasure to present this on behalf of other legislators.
So no other big announcements. I hope everyone enjoyed the salad and the entree. Thanks to our amazing chefs. So we are in for a real treat right now. We have Charles Duhigg here in the audience. He is the author of Smarter, Faster, Better, and also The Power of Habit. And we have these books here, so if you're interested in having him sign a book, he's available to do that afterwards. I'm really glad to meet him. I've been lucky to sit next to him during the supper. Charles is a best-selling author and Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter. He's written for the LA Times and the New York Times, and he currently writes for the New Yorker. And I just showed you these two books, but he has a new book coming out in February called Super Communicators, How to Unlock the Power of Connection. I'm really excited for that one to come out. Charles lives here in Santa Cruz, and he studied history at Yale and received an MBA from Harvard University. He is an amazing storyteller, using stories to drive home important insights. Okay. My two favorite insights from Charles's book about making positive change that apply so much to our work here at the Homeless Garden Project are the important role that community can play in supporting change. Community can help us suspend disbelief and overcome our skepticism about our ability to change. And the other insight that I really appreciated was that people who are able to make lasting changes, even in the face of crisis, hold a deep belief that change is possible. So please welcome Charles Duhigg.
And thank you to all of you. This is such a pleasure for me to get a chance to come and spend some time with you. And of course, thank you for your supporting Santa Cruz and the Homeless Garden Project and being a part of this community. My wife and I, Liz, moved here 3 years ago from Brooklyn. Hey, Brooklyn! Oh, there we go. So you guys know Brooklyn and Santa Cruz are basically exactly the same. There's The bagels are a little bit better here, but don't tell Brooklyn. And one of the nicest parts about coming here has just been how welcoming this community is, how much this community cares about all of its citizens, both the people who are our friends and the people who need our help. And so we have just felt so welcomed to come and be a part of Santa Cruz. I won't speak too long, but I thought I'd tell you guys a story which I think has a little bit of bearing on what we're thinking about and dealing with today. And it's a story that most of us know, or at least think that we know. It's the story of Rosa Parks. So everyone here knows the basics, right? December 1st, 1955, middle-aged woman, black woman named Rosa Parks, leaves work. She works as a seamstress at a department store in Montgomery, Alabama. And she goes out to the bus stop and she takes the 6 o'clock Cleveland bus route. And she gets on the bus. So in 1955, if you get onto a bus in Alabama, there's seats at the front that are reserved for whites. There's seats that are at the back, which is where black riders are encouraged to sit. And then there's this middle area that's kind of a neutral zone. And if it's open, anyone can sit there. So Rosa Parks, she gets on the bus, sits down in the neutral area because the black seats are filled and the white seats she's not eligible for. And it's the beginning of the bus route, and so there's not that many people on. But as the bus goes, it gets more and more crowded. And at some point, it's entirely filled with people standing up. Now there's 3 black riders sitting in this neutral area. And there's 1 white rider who is standing because he can't get a seat. And so the bus driver shouts back, "You guys need to move." But it's pretty noisy. Nobody moves. So he pulls the bus over and he gets up and he goes back and he says, "You need to move and give your seat to the white rider." 2 of the black riders get up and they move to the back. Rosa Parks does not. And the bus driver says, "You need to move." And she says, "There are 2 empty seats right next to me. He can sit down anywhere he wants. I'm not going to move." And the bus driver says, "Well, if that's true, then I'm going to need to get the cops." She says, "You go ahead and do that." He goes, he gets the cops. The cops come on the bus. They say, "Ma'am, will you please just move?" And she says, "I'm not going to move." She gets arrested. And as you know, this is the birth of the contemporary civil rights movement, right? This is the thing that brings Martin Luther King Jr. to prominence. This is when everything that we are so proud that our nation was able to do starts. Now, what's interesting, though, is that that's only about 10% of the story. There's a lot of other interesting aspects to this. Because the truth is, the interesting thing is that Rosa Parks was not the first person to refuse to give up her seat to a white rider. In fact, there had been dozens and dozens of cases like this. Some of my favorites are, so just a few years earlier, a woman named Geneva Johnson had been arrested for refusing to give up her seat and had ended up spending 6 months in jail for doing so. In 1949, 6 years before Rosa Parks, Viola White, Katie Wingfield, and their 2 children are all arrested and put in prison for refusing to give up their seats. In 1952, a police officer had come on board a bus and had shot and killed a black rider who had refused to give up his seat. Just 3 months before Rosa Parks is arrested for refusing to give up her seat, 2 women, Claudette Colvin and Mary Louise Smith, are also arrested. And none of those sparked any protests. None of those sparked any mass action. And the reason why is because if you were in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955, you would have seen that there's just no activist community. This is not a city that is well organized around protests. There were some activists, but the activists were focused on using the courts in order to get their rights recognized, in order to be protected. So the question is, why Rosa Parks? Why does Rosa Parks start what becomes the Montgomery bus boycott, a boycott that lasts an entire year, that launches the civil rights movement? And there's 2 answers. The first answer is that Rosa Parks was kind of unusual. Taylor Branch, who wrote A History of the Civil Rights Movement, called her one of those bright spots who makes up for a dozen or so sociopaths on the other end of the spectrum. And it's exactly true, right? So she belongs to dozens of these social networks that are important within Alabama, or within Montgomery. She's the secretary of the NAACP chapter. She attends a Methodist church. Even though she attends a Methodist church, she runs a youth group at the local Lutheran church because she just really liked churches. She volunteered at the library. She volunteered at the local soup kitchen. She was a seamstress, and she was the person that you would go to before your debutante ball to get your dress fitted for you. Put differently, in the words of social psychology, she is someone with a lot of strong ties. And so when she gets arrested, this very dignified, middle-aged woman, her strong ties hear about the fact that she's in jail, and they have a meeting, and they say, look, tomorrow we're going to encourage everyone to boycott the buses of Montgomery. One-day boycott. And at that point, had that occurred, we would have no idea who Rosa Parks is. But something else happens. And to explain what else happens, I have to tell you about this other guy really quickly, a researcher from the 1960s named Michael Ganzevetter. And Michael Ganzevetter, when he was getting his PhD, he was a social psychologist, he did this kind of interesting experiment. He sent letters to 264 people asking them how they had gotten their jobs. And he figured that most of them would have gotten their jobs through a friend. And he was right. About 15% of them had gotten their jobs through a friend of theirs. But the vast majority of them had gotten their jobs from a friend of a friend. What within social psychology is known as a weak tie. Someone that we have a connection to, but the connection is very nebulous. They're not someone we talk to on a regular basis. They're not someone we know well, but these people were much more influential at helping people get jobs. And it makes sense if you think about it, because your closest friends, they know all the same people you do, right? If you need to get a job, they know the same jobs that you're aware of. But a friend of a friend, that guy you went to business school with or to college with, or that one you see at the gym but you only talk to every 2 years because he's kind of weird, that guy knows all about all kinds of jobs that you've never heard of before. Weak ties are what make a social network work. And that's exactly what happened in Montgomery, Alabama. They decide to have this one-day protest, right, this boycott. And what they do is all the leaders of the black community are all kind of fighting with each other. And they can't decide who's going to be the one who stands up and leads this one-day boycott. But there's this brand new minister who just came to town. He's 26 years old. His name is Martin Luther King Jr. He seems smart, but most importantly, nobody knows anything about him and nobody hates him yet. And they all hate each other. And so R.D. Nixon, one of the leaders of the NAACP chapter in Montgomery, he calls up Martin Luther King Jr. and he says to him, do you mind if we use your church for this meeting to announce the boycott? And King says, I guess you can do that. And he says, good, because I've already invited 32 people and they're going to be there at 6 o'clock. And they show up. And then this is when the weak ties of Montgomery kick in. Because they announce this one-day boycott. And the way that they do it is they tell everyone to come the night before the boycott, to come to church. And they're going to explain how the boycott works. So people show up. And as they're sitting there, they're looking around. And the thing about a bus is, if you get on a bus, people can see you through the window. So when they say that there's going to be a bus boycott tomorrow and none of the black residents of Montgomery should ride the bus, if you decide not to go with the boycott, they're going to know. They can see you. Put differently, what weak ties are is it's peer pressure. And so nobody rides the bus for one day. And then they have another meeting. And they say we're going to extend it by one day. And the next day, nobody rides the bus. And they do it another day. And then the weak ties really kick in because people have to get to work. So what they start doing is they start organizing these carpools. And the way that they organize carpools is you're not driving your friend because your friend already probably has a ride. It's the friend of a friend that you drive. That's how they self-organize. And this is how the Montgomery bus boycott gets extended. It gets extended for an entire year because of the weak ties of this community, of the peer pressure. Because after 6 months, people were sick of it. They wanted to just ride the bus. They didn't like walking anymore. The carpools were hard. They started arresting all the people who would pick up, they called them jitney drivers, and they would arrest anyone who was picking up someone off the sidewalk. And yet it's continued, both because people were dedicated and because weak ties pressure us into believing in our community, into giving into our community, into making sacrifices for our community. And the reason why I mention this today is because when eventually the bus boycott ended, it did not end because the bus gave in. It ended because they won in court. The U.S. Supreme Court said that discrimination on buses was illegal. The bus boycott was called off. And what's interesting is that when people start riding the buses the next day, there's no rancor whatsoever. There are, in the 3 years after the bus boycott, there are no reported or recorded instances of arguments or fights on board a bus, which is crazy, right? That basically this long-standing social order changed overnight and nobody objected. And the reason why is because it had been a change that had been predicated both on the strong ties of relationships we have with people and the weak ties that we have. The interesting thing about Rosa Parks, who became the emblem of this, is that as a seamstress, everybody brought their daughter's dresses to her to get altered for debutante balls, the white community and the black community. Everybody knew Rosa Parks. Everybody knew a member of their community who had been touched by this bus boycott. And so everyone understood why it was so important. And I think that the parallel for us today is that as we are dealing with all of these issues that are so hard to deal with, about how to solve homelessness in Santa Cruz and in California, about how to deal with development plans and where we want the city to go, how to deal with an election that's going to be absolutely crazy and potentially terrifying, as we're surrounded by friends who might fall on different sides of the conflict that's going on right now in Israel and in Gaza. The thing that has always helped America and helped people get through periods like this is when we invest in our community, when we invest in both the strong ties and the weak ties that surround us. And it's events like this where you sit next to someone you haven't met before and you might not talk to again for another year or two. But at some point you might see them on the other side of a protest line or on the other side of a balloting issue, and to be able to say to them, let's talk about how you feel and how I feel, and let's come together, and even if we still disagree, we are a community. That has always been what drives social justice forward. And so thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for supporting this cause, and thank you for having me, Daria. This is such a wonderful organization, and it's so wonderful to be able to form strong and weak ties with all of you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. That's very kind.
That wreath was made by our trainee Armani, and it's fantastically beautiful, and it was made using flowers grown here on the farm.
Oh,
thank you for speaking. So our next speaker, David Quigley, is a trainee in our program. In our year-long program, trainees work 20 hours a week on our farm and in our workshop. And on the farm, we grow a wide variety of crops using organic methods for about 100 CSA members for a 23-week harvest season. Some of the crops we grow are used for raw materials in over 40 products made in our workshop by trainees and sold in our downtown Santa Cruz and Capitola stores and our online store. And that enterprise brings in about 25% of our income. And we hope you will visit and visit our little table over there tonight too. We say that at the Homeless Garden Project, people are planting seeds and transforming lives. We at the Homeless Garden Project provide the opportunity, and our trainees do the hard work, the real work of making change. Sometimes this happened with David. Trainees leave before they've completed their program. And we value the capacity of all individuals for growth and renewal. So when David returned to complete his program, we welcomed him back. And you'll hear more about this in his talk. David is earthy, kind, and loving. He is a generous listener. And it's been an honor to witness David's work on this talk because he's been so fearless in searching for his truth. Before we welcome David up here, I want to share that David recently graduated from his 6-month program at New Life Recovery Program. And also that he has shared with me that one of his goals is to pursue a career as a drug and alcohol counselor. So please welcome David Quigley.
All right, I take a deep breath because this is absolutely terrifying. All right, so I would like to start by saying it means a lot to me to be here right now. As a matter of fact, me being up here is the completion of something that I started over 2 years ago when I was first a part of this garden. I was offered the opportunity to give a talk for a benefit just like this, but at the time wasn't ready and failed the show. So I would like to thank Derry for giving me a chance to come full circle and deliver a speech that I should have been given over 2 years ago. Having my family present for this is very special as well, especially my mother, because she knows me best. And despite her unconditional love and acceptance of me, being vulnerable even as a child has been extremely hard. For whatever reasons, I felt like I had to keep my life private and hidden for fears I'm still coming to understand today. So she's had to deal with my silence, short answers, and stoicness since I was a child. I've loved her so much, but just never really been able to express it. I think about all the times when she would see me shutting the world out, all the times I've sat blank-faced and suffering inside, and the powerlessness she must have felt against it as I fell deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. Without her love, I wouldn't be here today. She is my rock and earned her seat here to hear this more than anyone. So the gratitude I have for this opportunity and this garden that raised it is very representative of the things that are taking shape in my life today. My life is becoming full, and I've begun to nurture within it a variety of things that are filling it with growth. And this opportunity means so much because my life hasn't always been full, and the growth at times has been far too painful to bear. At a young age, I felt disconnect between myself and the world. My younger years and into my teens, I consistently felt inadequate for my peers despite all the love I had growing up. I found myself constantly trying to fit in, taking certain traits from friends or other people I looked up to, and trying to fit it into my life. Without the acceptance and validation from you, I would quickly find myself feeling not good enough and outside of whatever thing I was trying to be a part of at the time. This type of people-pleasing chameleon I became completely exhausted me. Eventually, my true self got lost in the shuffle and left me hopelessly reaching for something to fill the gaping hole of identity in my life. I needed something to get me some relief, and my solution became drugs and alcohol. Where most people find problems using, I found my solution. And in the beginning, it worked. It took away my social anxiety, it gave me freedom, and for the first time, I found confidence in the things I was doing. And it seemed I had found what I was missing in my life, or so I foolishly thought. My substance use was like a luxury to me. Pain and weakness be damned. If life became too awkward, uncomfortable, painful, and sad, you name it, when in doubt, I could just numb it out. AA talks about an invisible line that every alcoholic eventually crosses. My substance use became no longer a luxury, but an absolute necessity. My solution deserted me and left my life reeling. I fought desperately to recapture the comforts that kept me insulated from my problems in the beginning, but to no avail. Once again, I was left vulnerable to my self-torture and to the fury of this world. Suffering through addiction reminds me of the Greek story of Sisyphus. Sisyphus, an ancient king, was punished for cheating death twice when it came to fetch him. Hades, being enraged by this, punished him by forcing him to roll a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down for eternity. He foolishly believed that despite failing over and over, that one day he could make it to the top. Not unlike Sisyphus, the addict becomes punished for trying to cheat life when it calls. Over and over, I proved that this way of life, this cancerous solution of substance, fails every time. And like our tragic hero, I foolishly believed that the next time would be different. I fought to avoid life. With all the destruction in my wake, I couldn't help but feel that I was an unwanted burden on the world, and those who loved me were better off without me. A disconnect, the feeling of inadequacy or being broken, was all-consuming once substance abuse becomes a serious problem. I didn't fit in, so I sought isolation. And soon burdened with a stigma that only furthered my disconnect from life. With the homeless man wandering in the streets, the alcoholic in his brown paper bag, or the drug addict twitching and screaming at the sky, all the hopeless unfortunates that are in plain sight but remain always unseen. The stigma that equates to a hideous intrusion of problem. You ask, who are these people? The truth is that most of us has someone close to us who suffers from this disconnect of life. Somebody that you know and love made some bad choices and caught up into something they don't quite understand and is now over his or her head. You say, you know, he's a good kid with a good heart, but he makes these decisions I just can't understand. And another truth is most who have experienced this hopelessness of addiction will never understand. So if my feeling apart and on the outside of everything is my problem, then trying to build a connection is an obvious answer. Life is unforgiving and confusing and at times, but it's also beautiful and poetic. It speaks to us through energy and feeling and measures us in paradox. To win, I was going to have to surrender, and most of all, to keep connection and happiness in life, I was going to have to give it away. Just gaining sobriety was not enough. The reality was that I was powerless against life itself. This is where I found the disconnect most powerful. It just seemed like there was no place for me to go. Outside the walls of rehab, away from those who can relate to my struggles, is a world that is fast and unfamiliar. The nagging desire to run back to something, anything that felt familiar was constantly nipping at my heels. So how do I go from being disconnected most of my life to becoming connected? How do I find hope and compassion when there seems like there is none? The Homeless Garden Project presented itself to me when I was searching for a way back into life, but wasn't sure how to make that happen. As it turns out, the garden specializes in just this problem. Evan, one of the staff, sat me down and told me how the trainee program worked, how the garden acts as a stepping stone to help reintegrate me back into life. A life that has always scared me and made me want to seek safety and hide. But this was completely different. The garden transformed into precisely the thing I needed at the time. It was gentle, welcoming, compassionate, and kind, but most importantly, understanding. I didn't have to hide who I was for the fear of offending somebody or being judged. Myself and the other trainees have all been humbled by life in one way or another, but now we belong to this thing that makes us feel apart. HGP has given us the powerful gift of connection, a connection between myself and the earth, a positive connection that I share with my fellow trainees, and a type of connection that I never had before, a connection with my community. I get up every morning and work to nurture the earth so we can harvest vegetables to feed the very community I thought hated me, and there's incredible power in that. I don't feel lost anymore, I feel a part of. We don't give up on people here at the garden. Me standing here sober presenting a talk that I ran out on over 2 years ago proves that truth. I've gained accountability, self-worth, connection, and growth since starting here. I even found my therapist through one of the wellness series presentations they offer every week. We need more places like the Homeless Garden Project. I see people all the time showing up, looking the way I felt the day I arrived. Out of breath. Simply starved for a connection, and I've yet to see this place turn a single person away. To myself and so many others, it's become much more than a garden. It's become a sanctuary for all of us who need a place to go and feel connected. Thank you.
Wowee.
Was worth the wait.
Thank you so much, Dave. He worked for a long time on that, and beautiful writer. Yeah. Thank you for your courage. So we have a very special next and last speaker, and that is Kathleen Rose Hughes. She is the chair of our Fund Development Committee. She is a past board member. She is a dear, dear person, and you're in for a treat.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, David. Your story is such a meaningful way to help all of us understand what really takes place here at the garden, at the Homeless Garden Project. I'm so honored to be a part of this, you know, and David, just as Derry said, you're so courageous. You're so brave, because it's very, very difficult to get up in front of many people that you don't know and tell significant parts of your life experience, and you do this just so that you can foster a greater understanding of the power of this program. And so I think that was a beautiful thing to do, and I really appreciate it. You know, Charles mentioned the power of connectivity, and David mentioned connection and community, and that really is the heart of the matter. And the power of connection and the power of community, it's here, you know, big time, big time. You know, I look out. I know some of you, and I'd love to know more of you. But we are a community here. Love all these volunteers in black and everybody who's helping. We are a community, and we're connected because in various ways we help support the Homeless Garden Project meet its mission. Such an important mission. Thank you, but I just have this in case I get lost. Thank you, Sally. So I think it's such a beautiful thing that we're all here together. I really mean that. All these different ages and reasons for being involved. And many of us, I know I have people in dear loved ones who struggle with addiction and with trying to keep them from being homeless. And so I feel like this is in some way family when I'm helping in the small ways that I do. But it's my pleasure to get to be the one who thanks all of you for attending and for being a part of this evening, and for purchasing your tickets, which the funds go to help support this marvelous program. And I hope that, like me, you have had an experience that's inspired you. And I hope you're inspired to actually give more as the giving season comes. It's upon us. And one thing that you may not know is that in the last 3 months of each year, here at the Homeless Garden Project, more than 50% of the funds that come in to help us come in this last quarter. So we are hoping to, again, meet our budget every year. You know, nonprofits, including this one, worry about things like this. So we are really hoping to have a strong final quarter, and you can help us with that. I can help us. We can all help with that. And if anybody is interested in the moment, there are people who can accept your credit cards, of course, and if you're interested in taking an envelope home. Now, Paul is in the back right there. He's holding up his hand. If somebody wants to give via a credit card, there's your guy. And I think there's also someone at the table with the items that are sold that can do the same thing. And if anyone wants to take an envelope home or take care of something tonight, that's great too. People, just raise your hand and they'll give them to you. And I hope that it is meaningful to the people who give to make these donations, that it really means something to you, because gifts really are for the giver, honestly, in the end. But David and your colleagues here and trainees, all the work that you're doing, we support you, and we support the staff that's doing this beautiful work. So I also wanted to just say that I hope you had a wonderful time this evening, and I'm glad that you did. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for attending tonight. We hope you all have a safe ride home, and we hope that you have a meaningful holiday season. So good evening, everyone.